Hi, I'm Dustin Abbott, and I'm here today to give you my standard review of the new Viltrox Autofocus 85mm F1.8 STM Mark II. And I'm testing it on Sony FE, full frame mirrorless. There also is a version available for Fuji X mount, so for APS-C. Now, this is a pretty unusual lens or situation in that about 13 months ago, I reviewed the Viltrox 85mm F1.8 STM lens. And so here we are about 14 months after the first one was announced and released. We have this second edition. So it's very, very rare that you ever see that quick of a turnaround on a lens like this. And so what I believe happened is that the initial lens, it was quite well received, particularly on Fuji, because there are much fewer options there. And so it's optically competent, autofocus is pretty good. However, it's a little bit heftier than what it needs to be. It has a nice degree of build. However, it's heavy at 636 grams. And so when you're comparing it to a very, very good Sony lens, the Sony FE 85mm F1.8, which weighs in at 371 grams, that starts to sound about nearly twice as heavy, although it's not quite that. And so you're talking about, though, a radically different kind of balance point on a camera, particularly if you are, trying to travel light. And so I think that what Viltrox saw is that they had an opportunity to make the weight a little bit more competitive, make a few minor mid-season tweaks there, improve the autofocus performance, and give us an overall more competent lens at the same price point while retaining and leveraging, I think, what was kind of optical performance that hit above the price point for the lens. And so we're going to break that down today and examine some of those differences. Now, if you want the detailed, definitive review that includes a thorough optical breakdown, I recommend that you take a look at the definitive review that I released earlier, and you can check that out and get more thorough information. Today's review, however, is going to hit the highlights and really kind of break down for you what exactly is different between the two lenses. So first of all, as mentioned, the price point comes in at an identical $399 US. There's some variance to that depending upon your market, depending upon the sale price that you get. The overall exterior dimensions of the two lenses are identical, with an 80 millimeter diameter by a 92-inch length. There is on both of them a 72 millimeter front filter thread. They have an identical minimum focus distance of 80 centimeters or 2.62 feet. And, basically the overall specs are the same. There are a few physical differences, however, and so while the exterior dimensions are the same, somehow they've managed to cut down some weight in the actual housing of the lens, and while it still feels metal and it feels very, very nicely made, they've dropped the weight down to 484 grams, or just over a pound. So that is still heavier than the Sony at 371 grams, but it's within the ballpark to where it's less of a deterrent for those that are put off by the sheer weight of the lens. It also makes it a better match on Fuji, where obviously the Fuji bodies tend to be a little bit smaller, and APS-C, this lens was really overweighted and over-engineered for APS-C. Some of the other tweaks that have come along the way is that the focus ring, there's a large difference in that while the damping is now on the heavier side, it feels much more precise. And so whereas the other one had very little weight to it and very little feel, this maybe has a little too much. I would like them to damp it off or take it back just a few degrees, but it definitely feels much more precise. They've also gone from just kind of a standard, blah lens hood to a petal-shaped hood that gives you a little bit more maybe style to the look of the lens, but more importantly, it's a little bit deeper and gives you a little bit more protection, because one of the few serious optical challenges for the lens is, as you can see from this video, it is a little bit flare prone in certain positions. So having a better lens hood is certainly a step up there. Like the previous edition, this does have a USB port, micro USB, right in the lens mount, and so it enables you to do quick firmware updates. Once you figure out how to do them, they need a little more details, instructions on the website. It's not really a fully transparent process. Once you figure out how to do it, though, it's really simple, and you can update firmware literally within seconds. Now, I know that there is a broad-based rumor out there of a firmware update that actually increases the available maximum aperture of the lens. I'll tell you this, I've tried it multiple times on both the Mark I and the Mark II. It doesn't work for me. Maybe your mileage may vary, but I can't get it to work. And frankly, I'm not convinced that a firmware update can actually increase a physical maximum aperture of a lens. It might be some kind of software glitch or reporting. I'm skeptical. So maybe your mileage may vary, but for me, I've tried it. I've gone through all the steps multiple times, both lenses. Doesn't work for me. So the other thing that has been tweaked and improved here is the autofocus performance. Now, both of these use a stepping motor. However, Viltrox claims that it is a quieter motor here, and it is better for IAF. In terms of the overall sound, I didn't pick up a lot of sound like for video pulls with either lens. Here you can take a listen. I don't really hear much of a difference. In reality, you really don't hear much of anything, so it's hard to tell much of a difference. It never was a loud lens to my ear anyway. However, what is improved is that there is a little bit more precision. Now, for those focus pulls, it still does a little bit of hunting there at the end, which I'm not crazy. Just that micro pulse right before it settles. I'd like to see them eliminate that, and I suspect that they will. They've demonstrated that they are willing to continue to work on firmware and have made real and definite improvements in autofocus performance by doing so. And so I think that there's still a little bit of room to improve there. However, for actually tracking eyes and IAF, throughout this portrait session, I had my subject at variety of different kind of angle of the eyes and different focus distances, and through the viewfinder, it was always just perfectly right on the eye, tracking perfectly. And as I reviewed all of the portrait shots, 42 megapixels, zoomed right in. They were all beautifully focused, not one miss there. So kudos to them. That's a real and significant, ongoing improvement of an already good product. Now, optically, as mentioned, I'm not doing a full optical breakdown here, but essentially I'll give you the highlights. What you have is a little bit more pincushion distortion than most competing 85mm lenses on Sony, with the exception of the Zeiss Batis 85mm f1.8. In fact, the characteristic of the two lenses when it comes to the vignette and the distortion is similar enough that I actually use the Zeiss Batis profile to correct, and it seems to correct basically perfectly. And so yes, it's a little bit more than say what the Sony or the Samyang or the Sigma 85mm lenses are, but it's not necessarily a big deal to correct for or to deal with. Optically, very sharp in the center of the frame, a little bit softer in the corners of the frame. Corners start to get sharp by about f2.8. At smaller apertures, this is a lens that is extremely sharp across the frame, and even at f1.8, I find it to be very, very sharp for like portrait work, where most of your focus is going to be within the center 2/3, where it's extremely sharp anyway. And so overall, very strong there. There is a little bit of chromatic aberrations that are not completely corrected. They're not enough to be destructive, in my opinion, in any images that I have shot. And only at a pixel level, I'll notice them periodically, but they aren't destructive to the image itself. And so optically, I actually really quite like the images from it. The bokeh is nice. Colors are maybe ever so slightly oversaturated. And so if you like that look, it's fantastic. For portraits, I find them just a little bit on the heavy side. But overall, I think that the image quality is really quite good. There are a number of people who prefer the bokeh from the Viltrox to the Sony 85mm f1.8. You can look at my 85mm shootout and see lots of comparisons. And so your mileage may vary. Once again, you can just kind of check that out and determine that for yourself. But what is clear is that this lens is performing optically above its price point, which is, considerably less expensive than any of the alternatives. So at the end of the day, Viltrox has taken a good lens and a very good price to performance ratio and has made it even better at no additional cost to you. Now, if you already own the Mark I lens, unless you're really turned off by the weight of it, there's no real reason to upgrade. You're going to get the exact same optical performance here. However, if you have not yet purchased, you might as well purchase this one since they retail for the same price and you're getting a little bit more complete a lens for doing so. And so at the end of the day, I think that makes it a great, great value. At around $400 US, this is a very strong performer. And then of course on Fuji, it compares quite favorably to the 90mm F2, which is the closest equivalent lens on Fuji. It's really on Fuji that this lens has made the most noise because there are relatively few third-party autofocusing alternatives out there to the much more expensive Fujinon lenses, and so I think this is a really attractive option there where it's giving you great image quality that competes quite well with the 90mm F2 and obviously at a vastly reduced price point. I'm Dustin Abbott. If you look in the description down below, you can find linkage there to my image gallery. Check out some photos. There are a number of buying links there if you'd like to purchase one for yourself. And beyond that, of course, linkage to follow me on social media, to become a patron, or to sign up for my newsletter. And if you haven't already, please click that subscribe button right here on YouTube. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.